Hi, quick warning. This episode might be triggering if you are a ghost. If you're not a ghost, I'm pretty sure you'll be fine. I just knew he was there. I pictured my mother pouring another gin and calling me names.
And on the morning of 29th November 2000, she passed away peacefully at just after 6:45 a.m.
Now, oddly, and I do think this is quite interesting, police don't disbelieve her. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Here we are. Another episode. Delighted to be sharing more stories. This is going to be 3 short stories in one episode. So just before I get into it, I'm just going to address something that I've been getting a lot of communication from people. I've been getting a lot of emails, a lot of questions, and I know they're all coming from a good place, but I just thought I would address the fact that at the moment I'm aware the output of the episodes, it is a little bit erratic. Not erotic, but erratic. It's all sort of coming out at different times than you're used to getting your episodes, and I'm not really following the usual Sunday, Wednesday kind of pattern, and that's basically in a nutshell. I know you don't need to come here and hear all about my life, but basically there's been some very positive changes in my life. So I've changed job, but with a change of job has also come a change of where I'm living at the moment. So I'm currently living partly in Glasgow, but I'm also partly living in Dundee, which is another city in Glasgow, and it's a good couple of hours away from Glasgow. So I'm living across 2 different places at the moment. I've got an increased workload, and life's just gone. It's just gone crazy. Everything's just gone a bit mad at the moment. But obviously, you know that at the forefront of my mind is the podcast, and I'm still trying to get episodes out as much as I can, and hopefully normal service will resume as soon as possible. And I thank you for your patience during this turbulent time. So this episode, right, okay, this started as a Halloween episode. I thought I'd do like a wee Halloween special, but it's not kind of gone that way. And actually, partly it didn't really go that way. Actually, because something happened when I was looking at stories. I started to sort of just listen to some of the ghost stories that people were sending me, and I started listening to or looking at some of the ghost stories I was looking at, and I was thinking, I know there's a lot of non-believers out there, right? I get that. There was chats on Facebook on the group that were going off about people going, I'm such a non-believer, I just don't think ghosts exist. This episode's not about changing that. I'm not ruling out strange experiences, and I'm not ruling out people who say that, otherworldly things have happened to them. But my investigation, it kind of changed focus as time went on. I started to listen to a lot of these experience stories. The kind of, I sensed a presence in the room, or, I just felt there was someone there, etc., etc. And so many of them happen around the time of grief. And so I kind of stopped and asked myself, is it? Is it actually that these things are in our imaginations? Partly because grief is maybe just too big, and maybe we need something else to be thinking about. Is it a way to cope? Is it that idea that the presence of another human being will help? Or is it that these ghosts and these presences do exist, and that there's just times when we're more open to it? I don't know that this has necessarily helped me answer that question. I'm just posing it as a thought. So yeah, if you're like, absolutely not, no fucking way do ghosts exist, it's just a load of nonsense, don't turn off the episode. Just listen to a couple of these. There's just 3 little stories, and I just want you to hear them. I just wanted to do a bit of investigating, bit of ghost busting, if you will. Like that joke. It's good. It was a dad joke. I mean, obviously, I can't really say that and let that pass without a bit of singing. And you know what I'm going to sing. If it's something strange in your neighborhood, who you gonna call? The Ghostbusters. If it's something weird and it don't feel good, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters. Dun, ain't afraid no ghost. Dun, ain't afraid no ghost. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed singing it. Alright, this episode, there's 3 chapters. Chapter 1, Tick-tock went the clock. Chapter 2, the law will never believe this. And Chapter 3, Leah and Bobby. Are we ready? Okay, let's go. Let's start with Tick-tock went the clock. And this story is from Lorraine Ledwell, who is one of the admins on the Facebook group. Now, Lorraine sent me an email, and I asked if Lorraine would very kindly record the story for me and for you, and let you hear the story. So, let's hear from Lorraine.
So this is my story. I suppose you call it a moment in time, if it's not too corny. To give a little bit of a backstory, my mother's father was a watchmaker, a master watchmaker, who literally died whilst doing what he loved, making and repairing beautiful timepieces. I don't remember him, as he was very small when he died, but apparently he was a beautiful, kind and generous grandfather. I do remember one of his clocks, one of his early pieces, apprentice piece I think, a pale green and pink mantle clock with silver metal frame and numbering. So his daughter, my mum, Christina, Sylvia, Maria, Anne, yes, she was half Italian, was one of the most hard-working people I've ever known, working 2 jobs as a barmaid and a welfare lady. I suppose what you call these days a teaching assistant. She looked after her children well and was a widow at the age of 40 to 3 young children. I was 7, my brother was 9 and my sister was 13. In 1999 she found out that she had cancer and we were all devastated. We cared for her at home as long as we could, but as the cancer progressed through her lungs and her brain, she had to spend her final week in hospital. And on the morning of 29th November 2000, she passed away peacefully at just after 6:45 a.m. The morning she died, I made my way to the hospital to be by her side for one last time and to tend to her needs like brushing her hair and putting her teeth in. All the things she'd asked me to do when she'd gone. "Don't let me go without my teeth in," she'd said. After returning from the hospital, the undertakers came and went, and my sister, my brother and I sat holding each other, comforting each other and not really wanting to talk anymore. We'd done enough talking about funerals and arrangements, and in fact Mum had arranged lots of things herself. So we settled down to grieve and cry in a quiet moment with each other. As I checked out the clock, just for the second time that day, it's just a normal, slightly tacky looking red and gold clock. I had to do a double take because the clock that was on a lounge wall had stopped. But I couldn't actually believe my eyes. The clock had ceased to count time any further than 6:47, and it was now 2:45 in the afternoon. I was speechless, but I knew why this clock had stopped. In my mind, I knew who was responsible. A sign. You might say a coincidence, others would conclude, but I knew how I felt about it, and I was comforted. Roughly a year after her passing and being in a state of depression, I was clearing out some of her own little possessions, deciding which needed to be sold, what to keep, what should go. And I was torn. None of them were particularly valuable, but sentimentality resided deep within those little trinkets. In my head, I silently asked for a sign, an affirmation that what I was doing was the right thing to do. She was missed so much, and I didn't know what to keep. What should I get rid of? What would I be throwing out with those things? So as I placed some of her prized possessions around me, I picked up a little ornamental cottage. Bless, I thought, Mum always loved these little things. Not my taste, but she adored them. This one was the Rose and Crown, and it had a little clock where the window should be. But I looked at the face of the clock that had been put away for nearly 12 months. The time, the hands of the clock were pointing to 6:47. Oh, bloody hell. Well, for me, I had my confirmation right there. Someone, Mum, was watching over me. Again, showing me again that she was around, caring for me again. I wasn't scared, but the butterflies flew in circles around my stomach. And I was happy. Sometimes when you have a story, it's difficult to tell how people will react to it, so you choose who you tell carefully. One particular night, I was telling this story to a very good and trusted friend, and I told her about the clock had stopped at Mum's time of death. I took her a picture and I showed her the cottage clock, actually the Rose and Crown pub, and I told her about the craftsman of her grandfather. I then realised that I had a clock that he made, the one I was talking about. He made it for my mum's wedding in 1954. Beautiful in its simplicity, but so sentimental. I took the clock out of the cupboard and to take a picture of it to show her, and as I did so, the clock, which I had never seen working, began to tick softly and gently, getting stronger for a couple of minutes. And then it too stopped. Once again, those butterflies, now huge and brightly coloured, swooped around my insides. I do believe in coincidences, but I'm also a believer. I don't have the lounge clock anymore. In fact, I actually don't know where it is, but I had the cottage clock and the grandfather's clock, and they are two of my prized possessions. And I will never replace the batteries, and I will never wind that clock again. They've given the message. Their job is done. As I said, I've always been a believer and I continue to be so. It's not an experience that scared me. It rather soothed me and helped me through my intense period of grief. These little things, these signs, these memories of wonderful people and the good times we had make me smile. If there's anything I can say that helped me through the grieving, is by remembering, by saying my mum's name, Christina or Chrissy, often, and by remembering how funny she was, how loving she was, how generous she was, and how loved she was. I had my time to be sad. Now is the time to remember, and I smile.
Okay, what did you think of that? There's something in that story I love, because I think there's a little bit of weirdness, but also there's something nice about it. I don't know, I don't know. I got real mixed emotions from that. So thank you, Lorraine, for that. It's lovely. I think it's a lovely story. Thank you. Alright, on to story 2. The law will never believe this. Now, if you're a true crimeist, if you're a true crimer, you will undoubtedly know this story, but I just had to tell it in the ghost episode because it is so good. It's just so good. This is the Greenbrier Ghost. So, the story begins in 1873, a long time ago. Why do all ghost stories always start in like 1873 or the 1900s? Why is nothing ever current? Why is nothing ever modern? Why are you not like, oh, there's a real 90s ghost hanging about? I just don't. Maybe people just stop being ghosts after a time. I don't know. Anyway, Elva Zona Hester is born. Yep, that was her name. She was born in Greenbrier County in 1896. She met, and you know that I love a good name. Wait until you hear this one. She met Edward Stribley Troutshoe. I'm not even kidding. The man's name was Edward Stribling Troutshoe. Brilliant. Can you imagine? Hello, I'm Mr. Troutshoe. Pleased to meet you. I don't know why he's got that accent, because he's American. But anyway. So Edward, aka the Troutshoe, he was like a drifter. He'd no job, he'd no money, he'd no real fixed place to live. I mean, he sounds like a catch. Sounds like such a catch. But here was Elva, and she fell in love with him. Yep, they met one night in a bar, and Elva fell head over heels for Edward. Maybe she just desperately wanted to be Mrs. Troutshoe. She was like, that's my goal in life. That's what I want to be. Now, Edward and Elva, they decided to marry. And because they got married, he knew that he was going to have to start earning some money to support Elva and a family. And he finds a job as a blacksmith. Now, there is someone in their life who does not like this marriage, and that is Elva's mother, Mary. Mary will become a really big part of this story, and Mary, she was not into this wedding. She was not into the idea of Edward. Just remember for now that Mary had objections from the beginning. After years of marriage, a very strange thing happens. One day, Edward is at work. He's blacksmithing. When he pulls aside one of the young boys who works for him. And he says, right, okay, I want you to run an errand for me. And the boy says, okay. He says to him, right, what I want you to do is, I want you to go home and pass a message to my wife, Elva. Okay, so this is the message, whatever that might be. Here's the message. Go to my house now, tell Elva, and then come back to work. So, off the boy goes. When the boy gets to the house, he chaps the door, and there's no answer. He chaps the door again, still no answer. But Edward has said, well, Elva's at home. She's going to be there. So, now the boy, he doesn't want to return to his work saying, oh, I haven't delivered the message. So he tries the door handle, and it's open. And so he decides he's going to go inside. At the foot of the stairs in the hallway lies the body of Elva. She's lying stretched out. Her feet are together and her hand is on her stomach. The boy sees Elva's body. He's terrified and he runs home to his own house and he tells his mother what he's just seen. Now his mother, she immediately calls the local doctor. She calls the local doctor, but the doctor doesn't arrive at Elva's house for an hour. A full hour it takes the doctor to get there. Now, word spreads quickly. Poor Elva has had a tragic fall down the stairs. Really quickly the news reaches Edward at his workplace and he rushes home. Now here is where it gets very odd indeed. When Edward gets home, the first thing he does is he moves his wife's body upstairs to the bedroom. Now, that's an odd sign. That's a very odd sign. As we true crimists know, you don't move a body. You do not move a body unless you have to move that body. Okay? So that's the first odd thing that old Trout Shoe does. The second odd thing is even weirder. It's even weirder. He takes off the clothes that she's wearing and he puts on one of her more formal dresses that has a really, really high neck on it. And he then places a veil over her face and he lays her on the bed. Right, I'm not being funny, but God forbid, if you came home and you found your wife dead at the bottom of the stairs, is the first thing you do move them upstairs, put them in a formal dress and put a veil over their face? I'm not sure that's what you would do. I don't think so. It's interesting, I was reading at the time that actually usually any of that business of, not of moving a body, but the business of redressing a corpse would be undertaken by the women in the community. The females of the community would come together and they would undertake those jobs. But no, here was Edward. He was determined to do it himself. So when the doctor does eventually get there, which has taken forever, he wants to examine the body. And Edward absolutely insists that he stays the whole entire time that the examination is happening. He must stay in the room next to Elva's body. And he's cradling his wife's head and he's crying hysterically. Oh, my poor Elva. Oh, she's dead. And the doctor notes in his notes, Edward is very, very upset. When the doctor goes up Elva's body and he gets to her neck, he notices some bruising on her neck. And it's at this point Edward goes absolutely mental. He goes crazy. He actually freaks out so much he becomes violent with the doctor trying to examine the body, and the doctor leaves. The doctor's like, okay, examination over. I'm out of here because Trout Shoe has gone nuts. Her cause of death is written down as everlasting faint. What? What does that even mean? That means nothing. That's nonsense. Okay, and back to what I was saying earlier on. Guess who had a major issue with the death? Mary, Elva's mother. She did not believe this everlasting faint business. She was like, no, I'm not having that. She actually said these words: the devil has killed her. And when she meant the devil, she meant Edward. Now, Edward, this is the thing. Do you know, see when you have a really fucking stupid criminal, that frustrates me. I'm like, just be smarter. See if you're going to kill someone, be smarter about it. Don't be a fucking idiot about it. Edward, he doesn't do anything to help himself at all. So all the whispering and the chatter in the town, it's building up. You know, oh, he's killed his wife. He's not helping himself by the fact that he will not at any point move away from her body. He will not move away from her. And worse than all of that, right, he sits constantly by her head. And when anyone tries to come anywhere near the body, he starts shouting, too close, you're too close, get away from her, get away from her. He won't let anyone get anywhere near the top half of her body. Someone dares to suggest, I don't know who, someone dares to suggest that Elva be buried in another outfit, and he goes bananas. He's like, no, she has to be buried in this, the high-necked outfit that I put her in. Okay, alright, Edward. Eddie, mate, you're not really doing much to help yourself here. I mean, it's all about Jean-Benet Ramsey, isn't it? It's all about, the lying at the bottom of the stairs, the being moved, the dress, won't let anyone near the body. Oh, it's just all about, yeah, come on. Obviously, I mean, Jean-Benet Ramsey was going to happen a lot later, so Edward didn't really have that to learn from. So he was, he was improvising. He was doing what he could in that moment. So the funeral for Elva arrives. Elva's, of course, still wearing the high neck dress. His behaviour, right, we can agree his behaviour was nuts. But one of the strange things that began to happen around the time of her funeral was his absolutely mental change in energy. He became like a man on drugs. He was like energetic. He was seen dancing round the town. He was like drinking all the time. He was almost like, yeah, it just had this complete, he went from, I'm hysterical, I'm crying, I need to be near her body and her head the whole entire time, into, I like a party with an atmosphere. He was like total party king at this time. He had all this energy. But yeah, which, was odd because Edward, I don't think was really, from the descriptions I can get, I don't think he was necessarily a man who was known for his huge bursts in energy. I don't think that that's really who he was. I think he was always just quite middle of the road, not really got much energy about him kind of way. It's kind of like there's this this is a small tangent, but there's a terrible terrible advert running on TV in the UK at the moment for for Viagra. And And it starts with a man who I would say, like, I don't know, he's like maybe like this actor's maybe like in his 50s or whatever, and you just see him like coming out of a bedroom, and he's in like a t-shirt and a pair of box shorts, and he like dances down the stairs, and he's like really happy, and he's like smiling, and he goes down to his wife, and she's really happy, and she's smiling, and he's like, yeah, and he just looks good, he picks her up, and he spins around, and it's like, ooh, this man is so happy. And literally, before I even knew what the advert was for, I said out loud, oh my god, this is an advert for Viagra. I can tell you right now, and that's exactly what it is. That's exactly, it's pure. And that's what I kind of imagine Edward to be like at that moment. Like he's a man who's had a lot of Viagra and is dancing about for joy. So obviously people are now like, right, okay, he's gone from hysterical, won't let anyone near the body, and now this. Okay. So her body gets put into a coffin and brought to the house for people to come and visit and say that they're goodbyes. But of course, when they get there, Edward's at the head of the coffin, near her neck. But by now, what he's done is he's wrapped a massive scarf around the neck. So as well as wearing the high-necked dress, the veil, she's now wearing a scarf. I'm sorry to laugh, but the image of it is just so weird. It's like, could you put any more clothes on her? Could you try and dress her up anymore? I've just got this image of Edward, like, he's dressing her up, but still, like, being, like, really, like, yeah, full of energy. And he kept his vigil near her head. He wouldn't let anyone go near her. Sorry, I can't stop laughing about the fact that he wrapped a scarf around her head along with a veil. Oh, Edward, you fucking nutter. He said, she loved this scarf and would want to be buried with it. It was some kind of like knitted woolen scarf that was just a part of her wardrobe, but he was no, she wanted to be buried with this scarf, along with her high-necked formal dress and her veil. I don't think so, Edward. Get a grip. So, Elva's funeral comes and it goes, and we need to go back to Mary, Elva's mother. She is not happy with this everlasting faint idea. She's very, very unhappy with this. And Mary, what she does is she takes to praying. She takes to praying every night that her daughter will somehow communicate with her and let her know what actually happened. And Mary's prayers are answered. Mary goes to the police station and she says, I need to report a murder. The murder of my daughter, Elva. And when police ask, how do you know that she was murdered? Mary will say, her ghost appeared to me and told me how she died. Now, oddly, and I do think this is quite interesting, police don't disbelieve her. They actually don't. I mean, I'm sure in the back of their heads they were maybe a little bit doubtful. They were maybe like, is this just a grieving mother? Not quite sure. But they actually believed what she had to say. Mary tells them that the ghost of Elva appeared to her and told her that Edward, in a rage, had asked her what was for dinner that evening, and when she'd told him what was for dinner and he realised that it included no meat, he had strangled her at the top of the stairs and thrown her lifeless body to the bottom. He'd then gone to work and staged the whole let's send the errand boy back to the house with a message so that he can discover the dead body. Now, police then go and they pay a visit to Edward and they ask him, did he have anything to do with his wife's death? He says adamantly no. He had nothing to do with it. Not a thing. Okay, sure. However, the police don't believe it. And what the police do is they actually arrest Edward. Now, here's the thing. Don't actually really have any evidence at this point because actually her body is buried. So they don't really have any evidence to work with, but they've decided that they're going to arrest Edward. So, when he is arrested and he is awaiting trial, they speak to the doctor who examined her body, and the doctor says, yes, okay, look, I might not have done the most thorough of examinations of her body, but the reason for that is because whenever I tried to go near her neck, he went nuts. He went absolutely bananas. So this then leads police to go, okay, what we need to do is we need to exhume her body and check it for signs of bruising around the neck, because the doctor never quite did that as part of the examination, and that's because Edward wouldn't allow that to happen. So they exhume her body, they take off that beautiful scarf, they lift the veil, they pull down the collar, and yes, there is severe bruising around her neck. And so Edward is charged with the murder of his wife. And it goes to court. And now, here is where it gets tricky, because what do they have as evidence? Well, they've got some strangulation marks on her neck that have been noted. Does it mean Edward was the one to strangle her? No. His defence will say he was at work at the time of her death. He had nothing to do with it. The prosecution will say, well, Edward was known to be volatile. He could often get very angry with Elva. And the defence will say, well, yeah, okay, but it's not really enough to hold up in court for charging someone with murder. Now what they do is they put Mary on the stand. So they put the mother on the stand. And now, this is what's interesting. Beforehand, the judge looks over all the evidence in the case, of which, there really isn't a great deal of evidence. However, the judge looks over the evidence and he rules out the discussion around the ghost visiting the mother. He's like, I just don't think it's going to help the case in any way. I don't think it's going to help a jury make a decision, because ghosts and ghost stories in a courtroom, nah, it's a bit odd. However, this is what happens. When Mary gets up onto the stand, the prosecution asks her, why are you so sure, why are you so convinced that Edward killed your daughter? And Mary launches into the whole story. She says, the ghost of my daughter came to visit me. She told me the whole entire story. I know that he strangled her at the top of the stairs, and I know that he is responsible for her death. And she told me this. Now what's really interesting is the judge at that point can't do anything because the story is out. He tries that thing of, and see, whenever I see this, I always think, how effective is that anyway? You know when a judge goes, strike it from the record, the jury, forget that you heard that evidence. Nah, that's never going to work, is it? You can't unhear something. You can't unknow something when you know it. You just can't. So, the jury have now heard that the ghost of Elva appeared to her mother and explained the death. The defence come back with, of course this is nonsense. A bloody ghost. A ghost as a, almost potential witness in a murder trial. Are you kidding me on? But the jury, they believe it. They believe Mary's story. And so, the jury retire, they come back very quickly, and they find Edward guilty. Edward Stribbling Troutshoe is sentenced to life in prison, and he dies in 1900. Just about the time when he'll probably turn into a ghost, because that's when that happened. Till the day that she died, Elva's mother Mary did not recant on the story once. She stood by the story that her daughter appeared to her as a ghost to help her make sure that Edward went to prison. And so ends the story. I love the Greenbrier ghost story. I just think it's so weird. It's the one and only time. It's so strange, but it's actually written in like law books. It's written in history as the one and only time that the testimony of a ghost has ever been used to convict someone for murder. Yeah, it's mad. I just love it. I just love that story. I know lots of you will know it, but yeah, I really like it. Okay, on to the third and the final story, Leah and Bobby. Alright, so I asked for people to send me stories. I asked on Facebook and I asked on Instagram for people to send me their stories, and a very kind listener did. The email starts, "Hi Barry, my name is Leah and I am in Indianapolis. I've been a listener to Extraordinary Stories for a while now. I'm a big fan." Oh, why thank you, Leah. Thank you very much. Okay, Leah's story. She says, "I was in my final semester of high school when I met Bobby. Bobby hadn't long moved to Indiana and he was finishing his high school year at my school. Now, and I want you ESP listeners to know, this next sentence is what Leah has written, but it's not true. It can't be true. Leah writes, "I've always been the plain one and never the attractive one in life." Leah, that makes me want to A, cry, and B, scream for two reasons. No one in life should measure themselves like that. Secondly, you're gorgeous. You're actually gorgeous. Leah follows me on Instagram and oh mama, you are hot. Okay? But you don't need that validation from me. So shut up with the "I am plain." No, you're not. Nobody's plain. I hate that. I really hate it. I mean, I would say I'm plain. I would consider myself as plain. Does that stop me walking into a room full of confidence? No, does it fuck? I'm like, "Hello, Betty has arrived. Hi, everyone." So, Leah, high school. Bobby Easton arrives to study. Now, him and Leah, she says they're in a few classes together. And he takes a bit of a shine to Leah. She writes, "My friends were shocked, and I was shocked. And when we dated, I couldn't help but feel I was being tricked. This was surely a joke. He was," in brackets, she writes, "an all-American guy." And then she puts the laughing emoji because she knows I hate nothing more than the term all-American. It means nothing, stop saying it. Leah writes, "Bobby and I began to date quite seriously, and I still always felt this must be some kind of a joke. There's no way he would want me." She says, "I loved every moment with him. He was my first proper sex." Sorry if that's too much information, but he was. "He was a man that my mother and father liked. He was going to be my future." Leah writes, "You will see that I've started to say was rather than is." 4 months after graduating high school, Leah discovered that she was pregnant, and her and Bobby, they had a hard time deciding what to do. who to tell, who not to tell. They were young, and Leah says, we knew we were going to have this baby, but we also knew, and she writes this in capitals, that we were fucked. So they go to Bobby's family and they break the news. So it's at this point I asked, why did you go to Bobby's family first? And Leah says, well, they were less likely to reach for a Bible than my family were. So Bobby's family know that Leah is pregnant. And this I love. I love this. Bobby's family offered to help Leah talk to her own mum and dad. Leah never says it outright in the email, but I get the impression that talking to her mum and dad would have been something quite difficult for her to do. So Bobby's family, they say, look, we will come with you and we'll talk it through. Okay, we'll sit down and we'll calm your parents down if they need it. And by the sounds of it, they will. Leah says in her email, I had visions of my dad picking up every item in the house and throwing it off a wall. He would be so angry that I was pregnant. And then she says, my mum would say a prayer and then pour another gin and probably call me some names. That's what I pictured. Now Bobby, he was a bit scared. He didn't know what the hell was going on. But Leah says, Bobby quite often just like to say, let's just fucking do this. Let's just fucking do this. And so she remembers that sometimes when she was scared or she felt like she couldn't do something, he would say to her, let's just fucking do this. Let's just get on with it. So Bobby's family they've essentially planned an ambush on Leah's family. They decide that what they're going to do is they're going to descend on the family, announce the pregnancy, and they're just going to, however hard it might be, they're just going to have to work it all out. And then life comes along and fucks it all up. Bobby had started an apprenticeship at a builder's yard in preparation for having a child. He thought he needed work. He thought, okay, it's time to, get some steady income. He was leaving work one night, getting ready to go home to Leah, and he's crossing the road when a drunk driver comes speeding out of control and runs into Bobby as he's walking down the road. Bobby dies instantly. The force of the hit from the drunk driver throws Bobby's body 10 feet in the air, and he lies dead on the road. News gets to Bobby's family quickly, and news gets to Leah. She says, complete devastation. Can I just say at this point, I can never believe, even now, this podcast is over a year old, I can never believe just how open you are with the stories that you send me and the things that you tell me. Please never stop doing that, because I love it. So Leah is, of course, in complete shock. She's devastated. She's pregnant. Her family still don't know at this point that she's pregnant. But she just has to deal with the death of Bobby. So the funeral comes around, and she still hasn't said to her family that she's pregnant. She writes, I spent my time in so much shock, such disbelief, and a crazy amount of anger. She then says, and then something happened for me that was going to change that. Looking at where kind of Leah is at the moment, she's in that place, I'm imagining she's in that place where there's going to come a point where you can't keep it a secret anymore. But also, I do think grief or massive shock in your life, I do think it does something to you, where it just actually makes you really honest. You know, I think sometimes it just has an effect on you where you just go, do you know what? I'm just going to be really honest about everything, about how I feel, about so many things right now, because all of your emotions kind of like get thrown up in the air. Everything just changes. I think we would all recognise that. Leah says she was never a believer in anything paranormal, anything spiritual. But after Bobby died, she says she started to feel a strange feeling when she was alone, that she actually wasn't alone. She says it never scared me because I knew it was him. She says, I know people will roll their eyes and think I'm insane, but I just know what I felt. So it's 3 weeks after Bobby's funeral and she still hasn't told her parents that she's pregnant. And she decides it's time. And she decides this through, and again, she puts the eye rolling emoji. She says, I decided to speak to Bobby's ghost. She's written, if anyone saw me in my living room talking to thin air, I would have been locked away. But she spoke to Bobby, the presence, and she asked him if he would come with her when she told her parents. She asked if he would hold her hand during that conversation. The next day, she went to her parents. She asked them to sit down. She said, I've got something to tell you. Leah felt in that moment stronger than she has ever felt. And again she says, you will think I'm crazy, but I felt his hand in mine as I sat on the couch. She told her mum and dad that she was pregnant. And did her dad smash up the house? Did her mum get a Bible and a gin? No. They both stood up. They came over to Leah. They held her in a hug. And they told her it was going to be fine. They kissed her and they promised her things will be fine. Leah says this, it was at that moment I knew I could no longer feel Bobby. He was leaving. He was going away. I wasn't sad. It was time. And she ends our communication by saying, I know this sounds like a terrible TV movie that bad actors would do, but you feel what you feel and no one can take that away from you. And so ends Leah's story. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed those 3 stories. This ghost-themed episode. Yeah, that's it. Story's over. Story's done. If you want to get in touch with me, you can. Where can you do it, I hear you ask? Well, join the Facebook group. It's getting busy. It's getting really busy. It's great. Twitter, Instagram, email me. extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. Send me a message. Get in touch with me. I would love to hear from you. If you are one of the people who is supporting me on Patreon, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for your support on Patreon. But thank you for your support in any form that it comes. I really appreciate it. Anyway, I'm sounding a bit sycophantic now, so I'm just going to wrap that up and say, until the next episode, thank you for listening. Know that I love you. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other.
She loved this scarf. I would want... He said she would... He said she loved this scarf and would want to be buried with it. It was like a woolen scarf that somebody had knitted. Some rubbish woolen scarf. And he was like, she wants to be buried with it. Oh man, Edward. What a dick. He said she loved this... He said she loved this scarf.
I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.